I recently shot a mini documentary in a day, and in this video I'm going to be breaking down all the details that went into creating the short film, including finding inspiration, planning, kit, storytelling and editing, and I'll also be telling you all the things I did wrong to hopefully help you if you plan on embarking on a similar project, which, side note, I highly recommend you do. It's a great form of self-development and an awesome way to flex your filmmaking muscles. This video is sponsored by Universal Music for Creators. More on them later. Hey friends, Will here. Last week I published the short film Grandad's Workshop on my channel. If you haven't already watched it, then I'd recommend pausing this video, going and watching it, and then coming back, as this video will make a lot more sense if you've watched the short film. This was a very personal project for me. The idea for this short film came about after being inspired by Philip Bloom's heartfelt Instagram post after his father died. He was urging filmmakers to make films of their loved ones whilst they can. I have a very close relationship with my dad, so his post really struck a chord with me, and I decided this would be a perfect passion project to fill a little bit of downtime in my work calendar. Side note, I think passion projects are hugely important for any creative professional. They're an opportunity to explore different styles and create meaningful work outside of client work. I think this is especially important if your day-to-day work doesn't quite align with the work that you would like to be getting. It's an opportunity to create work for your portfolio in the hope of attracting more of that work in the future. For me, that meant tackling a slightly longer form and slower narrative project rather than the more fast-paced marketing content that my portfolio already has plenty of. Passion projects are also a great time to experiment with styles and techniques which you might not be brave enough to try with a looming client deadline or an already tight budget. Passion projects also keep you productive during quiet times and ensure that you're still flexing your creative muscles instead of panicking about paying the bills and binge watching The Office. No, God! I took a very lightweight approach to planning this project, and this definitely isn't something I would recommend that you do if you're undertaking something similar. I gave some thought to what the story of the film would be. Of course, it wouldn't be a documentary unless it was telling some sort of story, and I've spoken with my dad a lot over the years about how he struggled academically at school and how he wasn't encouraged to pursue a creative career. So I felt this could be a great angle for the film, flipping that negative experience into an inspiring story about how he has pursued his craft later in life to become the master craftsman that he is. I made a few notes and came up with 3 cornerstone types of content which I felt would help tell that story. The cornerstones were footage of the workshop, fly on the wall footage of my dad working, and then more intentional interview footage with my dad talking. And of course I knew that I wanted this film to feel really intentional and to be as cinematic as possible. I figured that the workshop is such a cool little treasure trove that there would be no shortage of cool shots, and I wanted to think of the workshop almost as its own character in the film. I knew that if I ticked these 3 boxes, I'd have a great selection of varied footage to enable me to tell a compelling story in the edit. I jotted down a basic shot list in Apple Notes and headed into the shoot. In hindsight, this loose planning approach cost me a lot of time when it came to editing, but more on that later. I won't give a complete breakdown of all the kit I used to make this film, as it would make this video super long, but I figure it's worth mentioning a few bits and pieces which were important to how the film came out looking. I rigged the Sony a7S III up for handheld shooting. I knew I'd be shooting a lot of handheld shots, so rigging to add weight in this way helped me get smoother footage. I've done a whole video about my camera rig, so I'll link that down in the description. The only addition to that rig, which wasn't mentioned in that video, was the addition of a V-mount battery for extended power and even more weight. The whole film, bar 1 or 2 shots, was shot on the Sigma Art 24-70 f2.8 lens, and a fairly defining characteristic of how the film looks was the addition of the Nissi Swift True Tone Variable ND filter to manage my exposure, but also the 1/4 black diffusion filter to bloom the highlights and generally soften the footage. Another defining feature of the look of the film was using a ton of haze in the workshop to diffuse the natural light and add a bit of atmosphere. I just used a really cheap smoke machine for this, the kind that you would buy for like a school disco or something. Using haze like this really helps beams of light become more visible, and the shots with these beams were some of my favourite in this film. I relied mainly on natural light for this film, with one Amaran T2C tube light to add a bit of fill or backlight as needed. I did attempt to light the workshop from outside with a spotlight, but it just wasn't powerful enough. Luckily, the weather was actually on our side for once, and the sun beamed through the windows, giving the exact effect I was trying to achieve with the light. Lesson learnt here though, as this could have been a nightmare had the sun not played ball, but at least I know for future that I'd need a much more powerful light, like an Aperture 600X maybe, if I wanted to fake sunlight in this way in the future. Finally, I used the cheap generic manual slider to achieve the slider shots that you see in the film. I've owned this slider for years but not really used it much, so because this was a passion project, I was keen to experiment with it. And I'm really pleased with the results that I got. Whilst there are much fancier, smoother electric sliders available, I wouldn't hesitate to use this for a client project in the future. On the day of the shoot, I roughly split the available time into 3 chunks to cover the 3 cornerstones that I wanted to capture. As my shot list was fairly minimal, more of a guide than a strict list, as the day progressed, I ended up taking a much more fluid approach to things, capturing the shots of the workshop when the light was right, and then jumping back into conversations with my dad as he worked, and just trying to allow my dad to become comfortable with the camera so I could get natural and unforced footage. Sometimes I'd be capturing my dad working and he would say something interesting, so I'd ask a quick follow-up question and we'd jump back into a more interview style format before reverting back to the fly on the wall style. I think that working this way worked well for this project because I'm so close to my dad, but had this been a client project, I think a clearer shot list would have been helpful. I also should have kept better track of if I was ticking the right boxes regarding the narrative I needed for the edit. Whilst I had a ton of good stuff, it would have been really reassuring to know for definite that I had ticked off the key points I knew I needed for the edit. The edit was by far the most difficult part of this project. I'm not sure if it was because this was such a personal project or because I failed to plan or perhaps because I overshot, but I suspect it was a combination of all of these things. I also think I found it challenging because this was a very different type of project for me, and that was of course the whole point of a passion project. Editing a documentary is completely different to cutting a quick marketing video. This is where the majority of the heavy lifting is required to tease out the story and hit the right tone. It took me several iterations to reach an edit that I was even slightly happy with, and even then I kept second guessing myself as to whether it was too long or if it hit the right tone and effectively told the story I was trying to tell. Again, this is where maybe better planning could have saved the day. I should have maybe storyboarded the edit before I even picked up the camera, and then that way I'd have known exactly where I was heading once I started editing. I shared a rough cut of the film with several trusted friends and colleagues to get some external input, and this was really helpful to understand if the film was landing as intended. I actually ended up going back to my dad's workshop after the initial edit and feedback to grab a few quick pickup shots and additional audio to help convey the story more effectively. I'm really glad I did as well, because I think it made a huge impact on the final film. The whole film was shot in S-Log 3, and graded with the Phantom LUTs. Big shout out to Joel for creating these LUTs. I used the Arri FILMMAKING Eastman remastered LUT for this project, and it's got these really lovely warm tones, and I think these are one of the key characteristics of how the film looks. I've lost count of the hours I must have spent over the years scrolling through track after track of subpar options, but thanks to the sponsor of this video, Universal Music for Creators, finding the right music for this project was a breeze. Universal Music for Creators is a new world-leading subscription platform offering a brand new library of over 50,000 claims-free tracks and 200,000 sound effects, so you can use the best music while staying monetized. As soon as I got hands-on with the platform, I was immediately blown away by the quality of the music they have on offer, and the library is really varied. Whether you're looking for really short, punchy, upbeat tracks for social media, or the more slower-paced, contemplative undertones that I wanted for this short film, their library is jam-packed with options for any taste. The library is organised by themes and playlists, and also features a comprehensive filtering tool so you can really dial in your requirements. I've been especially impressed with the track variants they offer, which I don't think any other platforms provide. Not only do you have access to all the stems for the individual tracks, but Universal Music for Creators have gone to the extra effort of remixing tracks into different versions, from different length edits, perfect for intro stings or Instagram reels, right through to versions without vocals or just undertone versions, which are perfect for doc or narrative style work. All the music and sound effects are claims free for peace of mind when uploading your videos, and everything on offer is composed with video in mind, which means they have these really great dynamics to suit your edits, with like really nice cue points and rises. There's 2 pricing options to suit any creator's needs, and if you do decide to give it a go, you can get 2 months free with the code WILL2 at checkout. All the music in my short film came from Universal Music for Creators, and I was really spoilt for choice. Using the undertone versions and stems of the tracks meant I could always sculpt the music just the way I wanted it for this film. Thanks again to Universal Music for Creators for sponsoring this video. Tackling this project has been an amazing learning experience, allowing me to experiment with new techniques, hone my filmmaking skills, and capture my dad in a way that will last forever. I would wholeheartedly encourage you to take on your own passion project, whether it's capturing a loved one and creating a documentary in one day, or something completely different. And hopefully you can learn from my mistakes. Get serious about the planning phase of your project. It's tempting to crack straight on with the more fun parts, but time spent planning will save you double later in the process. Write yourself a really detailed shot list, or even storyboard the film. Again, it will save you time in the long run. Know the story that you're trying to tell, and ensure that you have the narrative planned out to ensure you hit the mark. And above all, have fun. I'm really proud of my short film, and I hope you enjoyed it, as well as this breakdown, which I hope you found helpful. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.